I never imagined my birthday would turn out like this. From the very start, something felt off. Carl was celebrating my birthday a day early, like he was trying to get it over with as quickly as possible, acting overly affectionate more than usual. These were all little signs that something wasn't right, but I didn't want to see them. When a woman wants to feel loved, she tends to overlook even the most obvious things. The night before, we had dinner at a nice restaurant with our friends. Everyone celebrated my 46th birthday. Carl had his arm around my waist, whispering sweet nothings in my ear, words that had long since lost their meaning, telling me how much he loved me, how important I was to him. But deep down, I felt nothing. That celebration wasn't for me. It felt more like Carl was fulfilling an obligation, doing what was expected of him. And then, when my actual birthday arrived, the house was empty. Carl had left early in the morning, saying, "I have something important to take care of. Maybe I'll stop by in the afternoon." He didn't even look guilty when he left, he just left. But what really hurt was why he did it, not because he didn't love me. I'd already known that for a long time, but because he was cheating on me. I couldn't prove it, but the feeling inside me had long since turned into something more than just suspicion. My stepson, Elias, was about to make a move that would change everything. He was nothing like his father. In fact, he was stronger, smarter, and more aware than Carl could ever be. Elias was Carl's 23-year-old son from his previous marriage. From the moment I met him, he had been a man I struggled to define my boundaries with, because every time our eyes met, I felt something I couldn't quite explain. I knew it was wrong, but feelings don't operate on right or wrong. I had no idea what was coming. I couldn't have imagined Elias would give me a gift so unexpected, a gift that would show me the truth and change my life forever. But at that moment, I had no clue. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Elias. "We're waiting for you at this address. Dad and I planned something special for your birthday." I hesitated for a moment after reading it. Carl planning a surprise evening for me? I couldn't believe it. Elias was about to take things to a whole new level. But before we get into that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to hear these stories. And if you like this one, leave a comment and hit the like button. It really helps me keep bringing you more. After last night's cold, lifeless celebration, it was hard to believe Carl actually cared about my birthday, especially since he had left that morning with a flimsy excuse, saying, "I have a lot to do today," and leaving me alone. I felt a wave of guilt for doubting him so much. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe he really was trying to make things right. Maybe Carl and Elias had planned something meaningful for me. I had a strange sense of unease, but at the same time, curiosity and excitement. I walked into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I needed to pull myself together. I styled my hair and carefully applied light but elegant makeup. Even though I knew Carl was indifferent, deep down, there was still a part of me that hoped that I'd finally receive the attention I had longed for but never gotten. I got dressed, ready, and headed to the address in the message. The moment I knocked on the door, it swung open quickly. Elias was standing there. As I looked at him, my eyes instinctively searched for Carl for a second, but Elias locked eyes with me and smiled. "Happy birthday, Abby?" That was all he said. Then he stepped back and gestured for me to come in. The moment I stepped inside, the scene in front of me took my breath away. The living room was set up perfect, the table carefully prepared, just for me, romantic but not overdone decorations, every detail thought through, dim lighting, soft music, and most importantly, a small gift box sitting right in the center of the table. I held my breath for a moment. This was so much more than I had expected. Elias watched my stunned expression before slowly stepping closer. "For you," he said, picking up the small box from the table and handing it to me. My fingers trembled as I opened it. My eyes instantly welled up. Inside was the necklace I had wanted for years, but Carl had never cared about the one I had mentioned countless times, only for him to brush it off. Elias had gotten it for me. When I looked up at him, the way he gazed at me cut through me like a blade. "You got this for me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Elias gave a small nod and looked straight into my eyes as he reached out and clasped the necklace around my neck. When his fingers brushed against my skin, I felt a small jolt inside me, but I didn't want to think about it. I couldn't think about it. As my fingers lightly traced over the necklace, a strange warmth spread through me. I didn't even know what to say. I just looked at him for a few seconds. Neither of us spoke a word. Finally, I took a deep breath and pulled myself together. "Where's Carl?" Elias didn't look away as he took a small step back, that slight but deeply meaningful smile still on his lips. "He's not here, and he's not coming." I furrowed my brows slightly. "But in your message, you said you were waiting with him." Elias paused for a moment, then tilted his head slightly, his gaze growing even more intense. "Would you have come if I hadn't said that?" For a few seconds I could hear nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat. He was right. If Carl hadn't been mentioned, would I have come? If I hadn't, I wouldn't be wearing the necklace I had wanted for so long right now, and I wouldn't have known about the real gift Elias was keeping from me, the one that would change everything. Elias hadn't even played his trump card yet. Elias grabbed the bottle of wine from the table, smoothly uncorking it before carefully pouring into 2 glasses. "Your favorite," he said, handing me one of the glasses. "I know because I saw how you smiled when you drank it with your friends a year ago." I narrowed my eyes as I held the glass in my hand. "How long have you been paying attention to what I drink, Elias?" He smiled. "I just know what you like." Something inside me trembled for a second. The way he looked at me, the way he spoke, every little move he made, they were carving their place in my mind without me even realizing it. The moment I took my first sip, I noticed how perfectly the wine matched my taste. I couldn't help but smile. Elias took a slow sip from his own glass, his eyes never leaving me. "You know, Abby," he said softly, "talking to you has always been easy." I raised my eyebrows slightly. "Oh yeah?" He nodded. "Sometimes I wonder how someone like you stayed with a man like my father for so long." Something inside me cracked at that moment. I slowly set my glass down on the table. "Sometimes I wonder the same thing." A heavy silence settled over the room. Elias leaned back into the couch, more relaxed now, but his eyes were still on me. "Hearing you say that is surprising, but at the same time it's really not." I looked away. I didn't want to say out loud everything running through my mind, but with Elias, words just seemed to slip out effortlessly. "Talking to you really is easy," I said with a small smile. "Sometimes I'm shocked at how well we understand each other." Elias tilted his head, his gaze warm but sharp, as if he had known this all along. "Doesn't surprise me." I took another sip of my wine, feeling the relaxation of the alcohol mix with something else, something deeper, something I couldn't quite define. But the strangest thing was how comfortable this closeness with Elias made me feel tonight. Without Carl, it felt so much more right. Elias's eyes were locked onto mine, the space between us getting smaller. My hands rested on my knees, my breathing uneven. It felt like the entire world had come to a stop. What was supposed to happen was about to happen, but just as our lips were about to meet, Elias suddenly pulled away. "Abby," he said, his voice shifting into something more serious, "I have something I need to show you." I blinked, my mind scrambling to make sense of his words right now. Trying to predict what went through Elias's mind had never been easy, but this was something else. Stopping in a moment like this to say something like that was weird, but there was something in his eyes, something firm, unshakable. He stood up and walked over to the television in the corner of the living room, picking up a small USB drive. Then he plugged it in. I thought it was a movie, but within seconds the images flashing across the screen made my blood run cold. Carl with another woman in a car, kissing his young secretary, then the 2 of them leaving a hotel together. Another clip, Carl dropping her off at her place after work, and more, so much more. It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. A wave of anger, disappointment, and a painful truth I had known deep down but refused to see washed over me all at once. I turned to Elias, my eyes burning, but I wasn't crying. Only one word managed to leave my lips. "Why?" Elias didn't look away. "Because you already knew, Abby," he said, his voice calm but absolute. "I knew you always felt it. But until you fully let go of Carl, until you made your decision, I didn't want to say anything." He reached out his hand toward me. "You needed to cut ties completely," he continued. "I'm sorry for doing this, but that man never deserved you. He's a terrible person." I looked back at the screen one last time, but I didn't need to see it anymore because Elias was right. I didn't say a word, I just took his hand. In that moment, it felt like everything around us had frozen. My mind was spinning, my heart pounding, but my eyes were still glued to the images on the screen, seeing Carl's lies, his betrayal laid out in front of me like this. It shattered something deep inside me, but the strangest thing of all, a part of me felt relieved because now I knew I didn't have to believe Carl's lies anymore. I didn't have to keep fooling myself. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. I wanted to think, but my thoughts had already slipped away from me, drifting entirely toward Elias. Elias, from the very beginning, he had been the one who felt the most right. When I felt his eyes on me, I slowly turned to him. From the very beginning, I started, my voice trembling slightly, but I pulled myself together. From the very beginning, I felt so close to you, Elias. Elias held his breath for a second, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Then he gave a small nod, that deep, reassuring look never leaving his face. I know, Abby, he said in a low, steady voice. I've always felt it too, and I've always wanted you. The space between us was closing. His voice dropped even softer as he spoke again. We could be happy together. My body froze in place. There was a tremble inside me, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of Elias's words and what they were doing to me. He kept his eyes on mine, unwavering. I didn't want to do this on your birthday, he continued. But you don't owe Carl anything anymore. I just want you to be happy. From now on, I want you to remember today as the moment everything changed. A warmth spread through me. This night had started with Carl's betrayal, but Elias's words were turning it into something completely different. I straightened slightly, my gaze drinking him in. He was watching me too. We were looking straight into each other's eyes, deeper than ever before, and then, I don't know who started it, but suddenly we were kissing. As I got lost in the kiss, I hesitated for just a moment. The weight of the emotions swirling inside me stole my breath away. Without a word, I pulled back from Elias and slowly walked toward the bedroom. I could hear my footsteps echoing against the floor. I could feel him following right behind me. When I stepped into the room, I saw myself in the large mirror in front of me, the uncertainty in my eyes, the heat on my cheeks, the way my chest rose and fell with the overwhelming feelings surging through me. Everything felt even more real in that moment. And just then, I felt the warmth behind me getting even closer. You're so beautiful, Elias murmured, his voice soft but full of certainty. I didn't take my eyes off the mirror. I didn't turn around. We just stared at each other through our reflections without breaking the silence. I slowly raised my hands and slid the straps of my dress off my shoulders. As I watched the fabric slip to the floor, I realized something. There wasn't a single doubt left inside me. I laid down slowly on the bed. I could see Elias holding his breath in the mirror, the surprise in his eyes, the admiration. Then, without looking away from me for even a second, he silently rid himself of his clothes and came closer. Elias lifted himself onto his knees, leaning in, his face just inches from mine. His eyes never wavered, never broke away from my own. His fingertips brushed against my cheek, his breath warm against my skin. Are you sure, Abby? He whispered, his voice deep and filled with a patience that was barely holding back something more. I stared straight into his eyes, and in that moment, all the chaos, all the thoughts inside me went completely silent. Elias, he was the one who saw me the most, the one who understood me the most. I had never been so sure of anything in my life. I slowly wrapped my fingers around his neck, feeling the warmth of his skin in my palms. Elias, I said, my voice steady and certain, you are the most incredible person I have ever seen in my life. Something flickered in his eyes, maybe relief, maybe a feeling that had finally been set free. Then, without a moment of hesitation, I pulled him toward me and pressed my lips against his once again. As we kissed, I watched him through the mirror beside us. Whenever we paused, I was overwhelmed with excitement, but this was love. It felt like a kind of liberation. I carefully watched the movement of his hands. At that moment, something huge stirred inside me. I closed my eyes and kept thinking about Elias, and now I could feel him too. Suddenly, I realized I was starting to sweat. Whether it was the effect of the alcohol or Elias himself, my heartbeat had become impossibly fast. The heat growing inside me was indescribable. It was as if I had been waiting for this moment forever, and my body responded with a deep, uncontrollable tension. I could feel myself lifting off the bed, rising toward Elias. Elias was breathless, just as overwhelmed. He no longer seemed like the composed, mature man who planned everything so carefully. And I loved that. I wanted to see even more of this side of him. I placed my hands on his back and pressed him closer. "You're perfect," I whispered. "You're the most handsome man I've ever seen, and thank you for these incredible gifts." Elias tensed even more, excitement flooding through him, and then he let himself go completely. Then he lay down beside me. Elias was next to me. Our fingers intertwined, our bodies still close, our breath slowly calming as we stared up at the ceiling. There was a strange kind of peace inside me at that moment. As I thought about what this night truly meant, I realized this was a turning point in my life. Elias turned his head toward me. His eyes were softer than ever, but they still held that deep sense of certainty. "Abby," he murmured, his fingers tracing gentle circles in my palm, "I want to take you away from here." I turned my head slightly to face him, surprised but also curious. "What do you mean?" Elias smiled. "I found a job in another country. My application got approved. My heart skipped a beat. A place far from here, away from every just you and me. Somewhere we can really be happy. No one to deal with, no lies, no pretending, just us, only us." A warmth spread through me in that moment. I couldn't help but admire him even more. How much more could he possibly surprise me? First the invitation, then the necklace. Then that incredible conversation, the proof of Carl's betrayal, and after that, this night, the most intense, electrifying night of my life. This was what truly saved me. I took a deep breath. "Let's go, Elias." Elias locked eyes with me like he had been waiting his entire life to hear those words. I wanted to be happy, even at 46, and I knew with Elias I finally would be. If you've made it this far, I know this story touched you deeply. There's so much more to share, and you won't want to miss a thing. Make sure to hit that follow button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment about this story.